Hello. Today General Hospital will reveal Willow exciting events in the next 2 weeks from August 4th to 15th, 2025. First, during the week of August 4th to August 8th. Tensions in Port Charles escalate on multiple fronts, beginning with a highly anticipated confrontation between Anna Devane and Liesl Albrecht. Anna, still struggling to regain her footing after a series of professional missteps and personal betrayals, approaches her encounter with Liesl cautiously. Liesl, as ever, is unpredictable. Her allegiance to past enemies and a mysterious new agenda makes her presence more dangerous than ever. Their conversation, veiled in civility but saturated with veiled threats and mutual distrust, unearths long-buried resentments about Faison, the WSB, and the damage done to those they've both tried to protect. Anna's composure begins to fray when Liesl cryptically refers to unfinished business in Switzerland, sparking a terrifying suspicion that Britt Westbourne may be tied to a broader scheme neither woman fully understands. Meanwhile, Ava Jerome sees an opportunity in Alexis Davis's current vulnerability and proposes an unorthodox arrangement that could neutralize Rick Lansing's growing threat. Rick, cornered by recent revelations, has been leveraging a blackmail scheme that Ava suspects goes deeper than Alexis realizes. Ava's proposal is simple on the surface: expose Rick before he can act, but carries with it unspoken consequences that would once again plunge Alexis into legal and moral ambiguity. Alexis hesitates, torn between a sense of justice and a long-standing, complicated loyalty to Rick. Ava, however, knows exactly which buttons to push, evoking memories of the past to compel Alexis into action. What begins as a pragmatic suggestion slowly transforms into a sinister alliance built on mutual secrets, broken trust, and the lingering guilt that neither woman dares to name aloud. In a far more reckless subplot, Christina Corinthos Davis becomes entangled in her own manipulations, escalating her obsession with Ava by paying Cody Bell an additional $10,000 to intensify his seduction. Christina believes this tactic will reveal Ava's vulnerability and ultimately dismantle the hold Ava has on her family and her emotions. What she fails to realize, however, is that Cody's allegiance is far from secure. With financial desperation pushing him to compromise his own boundaries, Cody's growing involvement with Ava takes on a life of its own. The deeper he goes, the more complicated his feelings become, not just toward Ava but toward Christina, whose motivations start to appear increasingly unhinged. As Cody blurs the lines between manipulation and genuine connection, the entire scheme threatens to implode, with Christina caught in a storm of her own making. Elsewhere, Jason Morgan, still operating under emotional strain after re-emerging in Port Charles, finally opens up to Sonny Corinthos about Britt Westbourne. The conversation is tense and weighted with history, especially as Jason recounts what he's discovered about Britt's disappearance and the troubling signs that she may still be alive but manipulated or even detained. Sonny listens in silence, but his mind races, piecing together connections that suggest someone within their own ranks might have betrayed them. The pain in Jason's voice when speaking about Britt reveals more than he intends, leaving Sonny not only unsettled but determined to act. Their discussion reignites a dormant mission for both men, one driven not by vengeance, but by the possibility of salvation for someone they once failed to protect. While chaos unfolds among the adults, the next generation finds itself at a crossroads as Danny Morgan steps into a role he never expected to fill, trying to guide Rocco Falconeri through a series of personal struggles. Danny offers advice drawn from his own life, lessons about anger, trust, and the fine line between loyalty and sacrifice. But Danny's words, well-intentioned though they may be, come at the worst possible time. Rocco, still adjusting to the emotional whiplash of his family's past, internalizes the advice in a way that fuels his frustration rather than easing it. The influence of older brothers and absent fathers weighs heavily, and what Danny intends as brotherly support slowly morphs into a spark that could ignite deeper rebellion. Second, Michael Corinthos finds himself engulfed in a storm of suspicion and emotional turbulence that forces him to confront the truths he's tried to ignore. With recent events surrounding Daisy Gilmore Corbin becoming more tangled and obscure, Michael begins to question the intentions of those closest to him. His mind, overwhelmed by a need for control and clarity, begins forming dangerous connections, first considering whether Willow may have some hidden role in observing or even tracking Daisy's movements. He doesn't want to believe it, but certain coincidences linger in his mind, and the more he tries to dismiss them, the more they fester beneath the surface. The idea that Willow could be involved in something secretive, not necessarily malicious but potentially damaging, haunts Michael in quiet moments when the weight of fatherhood and legacy presses too hard on his shoulders. Although Michael's first instincts lean toward defending Willow, there's an undercurrent of doubt that continues to push him toward darker possibilities. He reflects on Nina's earlier accusations toward Drew, initially seen as misguided or even cruel, and begins to wonder whether Nina's judgment, though harsh, might have touched on a greater truth. What if Drew's motives weren't entirely noble? What if there's more to his connection to Daisy and to Curtis Ashford than any of them are willing to admit? Michael, feeling increasingly isolated, shares his doubts in confidence with someone he believes can offer an objective view, possibly Carly, whose loyalty is fierce but whose ability to uncover secrets has always exceeded expectations. Confessing these doubts does not bring relief. Instead, it complicates Michael's internal conflict as the people he's supposed to trust now become central to a puzzle he's desperate to solve. Still, the possibility remains that Michael's suspicions aren't focused solely on Willow or Drew. His mind begins to spiral into a broader scope of paranoia, especially as he considers Drew's complicated history with Curtis. The unspoken rivalry between them, the subtle clashes of ambition and resentment, lead Michael to entertain the idea that Drew may be orchestrating a quiet revenge. Michael has no proof. Only a gnawing feeling that alliances in Port Charles are shifting in ways that could blindside everyone involved. With the past year having shaken so many relationships, Michael struggles with knowing when his instincts are accurate and when they're merely projections of past betrayals. The more he thinks about it, the more he realizes he's standing on unstable ground, with no clear direction forward except to follow his intuition, no matter how painful the consequences may be. Willow, however, remains steady in her resolve. Despite Michael's distance and his growing suspicions, she continues to reach out, hoping to mend the invisible fractures between them. She proposes a different kind of reconciliation, not rooted in apologies or explanations, but in the reuniting of the children. Her offer is simple yet emotionally charged. She wants access, connection, and inclusion in the family again. Whether her intentions are purely maternal or subtly strategic is unclear. But what's undeniable is that she misses the children and feels entitled to be part of their lives. Michael, torn between his duty as a protector and his residual affection for Willow, hesitates. Her timing, so synchronized with the rise of his doubts, makes the proposal feel almost manipulative, and yet there's a genuine tenderness in her eyes that reminds him of who she used to be. That emotional tug-of-war paralyzes him, deepening the distance between them rather than repairing it. Elsewhere, Harrison Chase finds himself drawn into the emotional chaos when he inadvertently collides with Michael over Willow's recent choices. Chase, driven by an innate sense of justice and a lingering soft spot for Willow, steps in to defend her against what he sees as unwarranted hostility. The confrontation is swift but heavy, filled with the kind of frustration that only years of familial entanglement and romantic missteps can breed. Chase doesn't understand Michael's bitterness and won't stand by while Willow is treated like a suspect. What was meant to be a calm conversation rapidly devolves into a verbal skirmish, with accusations flung from both sides and years of suppressed resentment bubbling to the surface. Michael, already on edge, takes the clash personally, further entrenching himself in his own suspicions and shutting down any outside perspective that challenges his worldview. Third, eventually, Drew Kane finds himself backed into a corner emotionally and strategically, with very few allies left to exploit in his ongoing efforts to reclaim a position of power and influence. In a calculated but desperate move, he turns to Elizabeth Baldwin for help, knowing she has a long-standing connection to many of the key players in Port Charles, including Willow. Drew doesn't initially present his intentions as manipulative, he frames the request as a concern for Willow's emotional well-being. Suggesting a meeting might bring some clarity or closure to lingering issues between them. Elizabeth, ever cautious and instinctively protective of those she cares about, is hesitant. She recognizes the subtle power play beneath Drew's polite facade and knows that getting involved could mean becoming entangled in a web of deceit that puts both Willow and others at risk. Yet despite her reservations, the sense of familiarity and shared history with Drew leaves her torn between loyalty and suspicion. Drew's true motives begin to surface the more he discusses Willow. Particularly his curiosity about how she's managing emotionally after everything that has happened. He poses as a concerned figure, one who simply wants to check in, perhaps apologize. Maybe offer her support, but Elizabeth isn't naive. She senses that Drew's interest in Willow isn't just about concern, it's about control. He probes Elizabeth for insights. Asking how Willow's been coping, who she's been spending time with, and what she might be vulnerable to. Drew masks his intentions with language of redemption and healing. But the undercurrent of strategy runs deep. Elizabeth realizes he may be trying to reinsert himself into Willow's life under the guise of compassion. And she must decide whether she'll enable this manipulation or find a way to quietly warn Willow of what may be coming. Although Drew has claimed he's ready to walk away from his past mistakes and begin again, those who know him well can see that his need to be in control still drives many of his actions. The idea of Willow moving on, healing without his influence, is something he's unable to fully accept. Rather than facing the guilt and consequences of his previous choices, Drew shifts focus to regaining her trust, even if it means distorting reality and placing her in emotionally precarious situations. The promise of a second chance, manufactured, not earned, becomes his obsession. He's convinced that if he can orchestrate the right circumstances, Willow will let her guard down again. Elizabeth watches all of this unfold and wonders if Drew is even capable of recognizing the line between love and manipulation anymore, especially when his actions continuously blur the boundaries. Elsewhere, Carly Spencer prepares to confront Jack Brennan with a proposal of her own, one that could reshape not just their romantic dynamic, but the trajectory of the entire operation involving Jocelyn. Carly, ever strategic and emotionally calculating, suspects that Brennan knows more about Jocelyn's whereabouts than he's admitting. Her offer is cloaked in flirtation and wrapped in promises of deeper connection, but beneath it lies a threat. If Brennan doesn't start cooperating, Carly will escalate her tactics. Brennan, skilled in secrecy and already dealing with internal dissent within his operation, remains enigmatic. While he doesn't entirely dismiss Carly's advances or her suspicion, he keeps the most volatile detail hidden. Jocelyn is currently embedded at the Five Poppies resort, under a false identity as Vaughn's wife, dangerously close to Britt, who is spiraling out of control and defying orders. At the Five Poppies resort, Jocelyn's role becomes increasingly perilous. Tasked with pretending to be Vaughn's wife as part of a covert surveillance effort, she struggles with the psychological strain of the charade. Particularly as she watches Britt make increasingly erratic decisions. Britt has stopped taking orders from her handlers and now acts purely on instinct, violating protocol, ignoring established limits, and putting everyone around her in jeopardy. Her reckless independence draws unwanted attention and has begun to provoke her mysterious superior, an entity whose patience is wearing thin. Jocelyn knows that any misstep could expose her or worse, make her the scapegoat for Britt's insubordination. She tries to stay focused, but the emotional toll of deceit, isolation, and the fear of what Britt might do next slowly begins to unravel her composure. Meanwhile, Britt, oblivious or perhaps uncaring about the danger she's inviting, marches deeper into the unknown, dragging Jocelyn and Vaughn with her toward a storm none of them may be prepared to survive. Finally, during the week of August 11th to August 15th, General Hospital promises a whirlwind of emotional upheaval, dangerous encounters, and the unraveling of long-held secrets, centered primarily around the Five Poppies resort in Dalmatia, where Jocelyn Jacks continues her undercover mission alongside Vaughn. The stakes grow higher than ever when Britt Westbourne, presumed dead and long believed to be out of the picture, comes dangerously close to crossing paths with Jocelyn. Whether by a fleeting glance, a familiar silhouette, or the unmistakable echo of Britt's voice, the moment triggers a visceral reaction in Jocelyn. She can hardly process what she's witnessing. How could Britt be alive, and more importantly, what is she doing here? In the heart of a covert operation surrounded by deception? Her instincts scream to confront Britt, but the mission demands silence. Her entire cover, and possibly her life, depends on restraint. Jocelyn's world becomes even more unsteady as her relationship with Vaughn begins to drift away from performance and into reality. What began as a practical cover, posing as Vaughn's wife to blend in and gather intel, has grown dangerously intimate behind closed doors. The longer they stay in their shared suite, the line between their roles and their feelings begins to dissolve. In the stillness of night, Jocelyn wonders if her affection for Vaughn is a byproduct of proximity and danger, or if it's something far more real, something she's afraid to name. Vaughn, too, is conflicted. Caught between duty and desire, trying to protect Jocelyn while navigating feelings that were never part of the mission plan. Their emotional entanglement becomes a threat to the entire operation, especially as Jason Morgan continues to close in on Britt's location. Jason, who has followed breadcrumbs of intel and coded whispers across Europe, believes that Britt may still be alive, and if she is, he's convinced she's being used or manipulated by someone powerful. His instincts draw him toward Dalmatia, though he doesn't yet know just how close he is to discovering not only Britt but Jocelyn as well. If Jason reaches the resort and uncovers the truth, it could send shockwaves through every carefully constructed layer of deception. And while Jason may be a trusted ally, his methods are far from subtle. His arrival could blow the entire operation wide open, leaving Jocelyn and Vaughn dangerously exposed. For Jocelyn, the possibility of being found by Jason creates an agonizing paradox. On one hand, she longs for the protection, for the familiar presence of someone who knows her and has stood by her family for years. But on the other, Jason's interference could destroy everything she and Vaughn have risked their lives to maintain. If Jason confronts her in public, if he demands answers, if he fails to realize the delicate balance they've been preserving, everything could collapse. Jocelyn is forced to take extreme precautions, even considering sending a silent warning to keep Jason away. But time is running out, and she knows that delaying him for too long may have consequences she can't predict. Meanwhile, Britt continues to operate outside the bounds of control, defying her handlers and pursuing her own hidden objectives. Her actions are increasingly erratic, her behavior impulsive and volatile. She has become a liability, not only to those managing the resort but also to whatever larger force has positioned her here. She refuses to follow the protocols set in place for her protection, choosing instead to assert her independence, no matter the risk. Her refusal to conform, while admirable in spirit, only serves to paint a target on her back. Unbeknownst to her, her superior is growing weary of her defiance and may already be planning to remove her permanently if she steps out of line again. As tension builds within the walls of Five Poppies, Carly Spencer is back in Port Charles, trying to extract information from Jack Brennan. She senses that Brennan knows more than he's revealing about Jocelyn's current status. Although he feigns ignorance, his subtle reactions suggest otherwise. Carly, never one to back down, makes a bold offer, one laced with emotional